Master, I bow with you. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, translated by James Haughton Woods. For if they were not, the body would fall. Similarly, in the case of the parts of the body, the flesh and the other parts, there is reciprocal relation, a sustained and sustainer. Likewise, the great elements, that is, the earth and the other elements, and these elements are in the reciprocal relation, a sustained and sustainer. In the case of bodies dwelling in the worlds of human beings, or of Varuna, or of the sun, or of the wind, Gandhavaha, or of the moon. Thus, in the case of earth, which has the qualities, guna, of odor and taste, and color and touch and sound, there are 5 great elements standing in the reciprocal relation of sustained and sustainer. In the case of water, there are 4. In the case of fire, 3. In the case of wind, 2. Furthermore, animal and human and divine bodies stand in a relation of sustained and sustainer. Someone asks, how can this reciprocal relation of sustained and sustainer be so, if the bodies are not in the relation of holder and held? He replies, since human depend upon each other. For the human body is sustained by the use of the bodies of tame animals, and of birds, and of wild animals, and of plants. Similarly, bodies, like the tigers, are sustained by the use of the human bodies, and those of the tame and wild animals, and of others. And again, in the same way, the body of the tame animal, and of the bird, and of the wild animal is sustained by the use of plants and similar things. Likewise, the divine makes use, I don't worship anything that needs sustained by me worshiping it, but he is saying that their divines are sustained by the use of sacrifices and goats and deer, and the flesh of grouse, and ghee, and baked rice cakes, and branches of mango, sahakara, and handfuls of darba grass, prastara, offered by human beings. In the same way, the deity also sustains human beings and the rest by granting boons and showers. Thus, the dependence is reciprocal. This is the meaning. The rest is easy. Well, we're sustained because there's the boon, but we are evoking ourselves. We are doing something for ourselves as we worship, right? In this sutra, the aids to yoga are determined, 29. Abstentions and observances, and postures, and regulations of the breath, and withdrawal of the senses, and fixed attention, and contemplation, and concentration are the 8 aids. The follow-up of these must be performed in succession, and what they are we shall describe, now with the intent of excluding either a larger or a smaller number. He determines what are the aids to yoga by saying, in this sutra, the aids to yoga are determined. The sutra begins with the word 29, abstentions, and ends with the words aids. Not AIDS, but those same letters without, being capital or having dots in between. Practice and passionlessness, and belief and energy and the rest, 120, both by reason of their own selves and insofar as are indispensable, are also properly to be included among these same. Of these 8, 30. Abstinence from injury and from falsehood and from theft and from incontinence and from acceptance of gifts are the abstentions. We certainly don't want our spiritual life to seem like it's the cause of our sustenance. If we're in need, we're in need. It shouldn't matter whether or not we're given a priestly status or not, or a renunciate or some other such thing. Of these 5, abstinence from injury means the abstinence from malice towards all living creatures, in every way, and at all times. And the other abstinences, and the other abstentations and observances are rooted in it, insofar as their aim is the perfection of it. They are taught in order to teach it. And in this sense it has been said, surely, the same Brahman, in proportion as he desires to take upon himself many courses of action, in this proportion, refraining from heedlessly giving injury, fulfills the abstentation of abstinence from injury in order to give it the full character of its spotlessness. Abstinence from falsehood, satya, means speech and mind such as correspond to the object intended, and speech and mind corresponding to what is seen or inferred or heard. If speech is spoken in order that one's own knowledge may pass to someone else, it should not be deceitful or mistaken or barren of information, and then it would be abstinence from falsehood. It should be used for the service of all, not for the ruin of creatures. And even when used thus, it should be only for the ruin of creatures. It would not be an abstinence from falsehood. It would be nothing less than wrong, insofar as there would be a false kind of merit, and a resemblance of merit. It would become the worst of evils. Therefore let the yogin consider the first what is good for all creatures, then speak with abstinence from falsehood. Theft is the unauthorized achastra purvaka, appropriation of things of value from another, while abstinence from theft, when free of coveting, is the refusal to do this. Continence is control of the hidden organ of the generation. Abstinence from acceptance of gifts is abstinence from appropriating objects, because one sees the disadvantage in acquiring them, or keeping them, or losing them, or in being attached to them, or in harming them. These are the abstinences, or the abstentations. Having announced the aids to yoga, of which the first are the abstentations and the observances, he introduces a sutra which specifies the abstentations by saying, of these 8. The sutra begins with the words 30, abstinence from injury, and ends with the words abstentations. He describes the aid to yoga, called abstinence from injury, by saying, in every way. He praises such abstinences from injury with the words, and the other. Rooted in it would mean that even if these are performed without observing abstinence from injury, they are as if they had not been performed, since they are quite fruitless. This is the meaning. The following up of them has nothing as its aim but the perfection of this, abstinence from killing. If abstinence from killing has the others rooted in it, how can it be that they aim at the perfection of the abstinence from injury? To this he replies, in order to teach it. Perfection, in other words, the rise in the consciousness of a thought. An objector asks, this may be true, but if the others exist for the sake of knowing abstinence from injury, what need of them, since this thought comes from the other source? In reply, he says, its spotlessness. If the others were not followed up, abstinence from injury would be defiled by falsehood and other vices. With reference to the same point, he tells of a concurrent opinion of those who have the tradition agamika, in the words, and in this sense it has been said, easy. He gives the distinguishing characteristic of abstinence from falsehood in the words, speech and mind are corresponded to the object intended. The word such, yatha, raises an expectation which is fulfilled by the words corresponding to what is seen. He brings into this connexion with the correlated word corresponding to tatha in the expression speech and mind and corresponding to, and this should be whenever there is a desire to say something is spoken otherwise than as seen. It is not abstinence from falsehood. This is stated with an explanation in the words to some other person, in order that knowledge therefore may pass to someone else. Speech is spoken or uttered to produce knowledge, similar to one's own knowledge. If it is not deceitful or the cause of deceit, it is abstinence from falsehood. Just as when Drona, the master, Mahabharata 7, chapter 190, asks Yudhisthira, the king, with regard to the death of his own son, Achvathaman, vulnerable heir, Ayuthman, thou who art rich in truth, has Achvathaman been slain, and he having in mind the elephant, who had the corresponding name, it is true, Achvathaman is slain. This is an answer which does not make Yudhisthira's own knowledge pass to the other person, for his own knowledge, derived from the sense organ, had as its object the slaying of the elephant, and this knowledge was not passed to Drona, but quite another knowledge, that the slaying of the latter's son was formed in Drona's mind, are mistaken, means due to a mistake. Reading Indriya Janma with the Kannar manuscript. Okay. Means due to a mistake, either at the time when one desires to say something, or at the time of determining what the object to be perceived is. Barren of information is barren as regards information. For instance, an outlandish tongue is barren of information to Aryans, or it may be purposeless, as for instance speech, the utterance of which is not meant to be uttered. For in this latter case, although one's knowledge does pass to the other person, still it is exactly the opposite of making knowledge pass to another, because it was not purposed. And abstinence from falsehood, either when it has these distinguishing characteristics, if it results in injury to another, would be a false kind of abstinence from falsehood, but would not be abstinence from falsehood, as he says in the words, if it. For example, one who practices austerities in abstinence from falsehood, when asked by robbers which way the rich merchant had gone, told the way the rich merchant had gone. It should be used, that is, uttered, the rest is easy, such as explanatory. Negative idea explains that the positive, he explains the distinguishing characteristics of theft by saying, theft is the unauthorized. Here the generic idea is characterized by a qualification. This is the meaning, since verbal and bodily operations are preceded by mental operations. It is operation of mind because it is dormant. That is mentioned in the words, free from coveting. He tells what continence is in the words, hidden. For even if his organ of generation is held in control, still he becomes attached at the sight of a woman, or upon hearing her talk, or upon touching her limbs, which are the seats of Kandarpa. He has no continence. So yeah, none of this technical. Well, actual virgin, but you're opening all the gates, and it's like, I'm gonna be alone with her. I'm gonna touch her. I'm gonna flirt with her. But oh, I am so virtuous. It's like, yeah, you're doing all the sins on the way, and even if you don't do the other ones, don't claim yourself all high and mighty just because um, you can live a lot more lusty life going around touching women and not getting laid versus, actually satisfying those desires and going on with your day. Not that one goes down that route or anything, but, So to exclude this case, he says, the hidden organ, other organs also that very ardent for this woman are to be watched. He tells what abstinence from acceptance of gifts is by saying objects. He means the disadvantage due to the attachment of these objects in the words 2:15, since passions increase because of application to enjoyments, and the skill of the organs also increases. The disadvantage, which is characteristic of injury, is also expressed by the words, enjoyment is impossible unless one has harmed some living creature. Although obtained without effort, objects if unauthorized have disadvantages. One acquires them, since the acquisition of such things is censured, and even if authorized objects, when acquired, are evidently disadvantageous, in order that they may be kept, and so on. Therefore, abstinence from acceptance of gifts is the refusal to appropriate them. Now, as far as these 5 abstentions, one of the things we have here, is definitely aside from the rumbling and tumbly. Probably didn't drink enough water with my meal. Is, being not so quick to judge the actions right. You try to be scrupulously honest, but holding back on information because it won't be good for the people who get the information, or because there's a secret that you weren't supposed to tell, and that sort of thing. It's different. Being gracious and accepting a boon, that's one thing, but insisting on gifts, oh, I will pray for you if you give me this, or would be the thing that a mystic would have to answer to, but I'm not going to ramble on here, but 31. When they are unqualified by species or place or time or exigency, or when covering all these classes, under these circumstances exist the great course of conduct. Of these 5, abstinences from injury is qualified in respect to species as follows. A catcher of fish does injury to fishes only, and to nothing else. The same is qualified in respect to place, as when one says, I will not slay in a holy place. Well, I kind of agree with that. The same is qualified in respect of time, as one says, I will not slay on the 14th day of the lunar fortnight, or on a day of good omen. The same in the case of one who refrains from these 3 is qualified in respect of exigency, as one who says, for the sake of gods and Brahmins, and not otherwise will I slay. Well, yeah, whatever for a spiritual purpose, go ahead, do it. Well, certainly certain principles should be followed, right? And obey the law of the land. The best days, the 10th through 13th of the 12th month, are the best days to kill an animal. In terms of edible animal for sacrifice, and animal sacrifices. For a priestly person, to protect the innocent, protect the houses of worship, eating And the idea, oh, well, I only will have animals slaughtered if others are going to share my eating. The sacrifices, you give a portion. But a priestly class, again, see, the process of yoga is becoming a Brahman character, whether or not you were born in such a class or not. Likewise, also in the case of the warrior who says, "In battle only I will do injury and nowhere else." Well, why are they going to battle in the first place? Abstinence from injury and other abstinences, unqualified by these species or times or places, are exigencies, must be kept when covering no less than all these cases. In all these classes means with regard to all these objects without exceptions, and no less than all these classes. That is what is meant by speaking of the great course of conduct when covering all these stages. Now as for these, the sutra begins with the words 31 by species and ends with the words great course of conduct. When covering all these classes means those which are found in all these stages, which are characterized as being species and the other three stages. The words abstinence from injury and the other abstinences mean that the definition of the great course of conduct must be asserted in the case of the other abstentions also. This comment is easy. Oh. I accidentally read the extra things in it. Okay, how's 31? When they are unqualified by species or place or time or exigency, and when all classes, the great course of conduct. Okay, 32. Cleanliness and contentment and self-castigation and study and devotion to the Ishvara are the observances. Remember, ich, much like ish, and, guna, ish, guna, ich. Ganesh is, ruler, aware, able within the modes, and Ishvara, we have Ishvara of our higher self, and Ishvara of, referring to God as the ultimate Ishvara. But, so there's a bit of confusion if you take some things out of context. So, certainly more recent scriptures than the Hindu scriptures have clarified some of these things. Well, some of them weren't written down until, but they come from a period thousands of years ago, that sort of thing. Of these 5 cleanlinesses is produced by earth or by water or the like, and by the consumption and other requirements with regard to pure sacrificial food. This is outer. Inner cleanliness is the washing away of the blemishes of the mind stuff. To practice contentment means not to covet more than the means at hand. Self-castigation is the bearing of extremes, hunger and thirst, cold and heat, standing and sitting, stock stillness, and formal stillness, and according to usage, courses of conduct, such as mortifications, kritra, and lunar fast, and rigid penances. Study is the recital of books that treat of release, or the repetition of the syllable of adoration, pranava. Devotion to the Ishvara is the offering up of all actions to the Supreme Teacher, he who rests in himself, for whom the network of perverse considerations, vitarka, has been destroyed, whether resting upon a bed or a seat, wandering upon a road, would behold the destruction of the seed of the round of rebirths, would be permanently released, would participate in deathless delights, with regard to which this has been said, Book 1, 29. Thereafter comes the right knowledge of him who thinks in an inverse way, and the removal of obstacles. He expounds cleanliness and the other observances, and the sutra begins with the word 32. Cleanliness and ends with the word observances. He explains the sutra by saying cleanliness. The words are meant to include cow dung and such things. I'm sorry if it's urine or poop. It is impurity, not purity. But pure sacrificial food is the barley, mixed with cow's urine and the rest, eaten at the Shravani festival. There is a consumption and other requirements with regard to this food. The other requirements are meant to cover regulation of the dimensions and of the number of these morsels, instead of saying produced by the consumption and other requirements with regard to pure sacrificial food. He says, and by the consumption and other requirements with regard to pure sacrificial food. For in the effect, the cause is supposed to figuratively to exist. The stains of the mind stuff, such as arrogance and pride and jealousy, the removal of this is cleanliness of the central organ. Contentment is the desire to take no more than is necessary for the general maintenance of life, because it follows renunciation of which has been before one's own property. This is the distinction from abstinence from acceptance of gifts. Stock stillness is the abstinence of any indication of one's intention, even by signs. Foremost stillness is merely refraining from speech. In the phrase, for whom the network of perverse considerations has been destroyed, the words perverse considerations will be latter, 233, described, and doubts and misconceptions should be added as parts of the network. To this extent, his intention is said to be pure. Well, if your intentions are pure and you're eating urine and poop, I don't care how you dilute it. What's wrong with you? These absentations and observances are also described in the Vishnu Purana 6, 7, 86 through 87. Wishing to reduce the mind to its proper state, he should resort to abstinence from incontinence, and from injury, and from falsehood, and from theft, and from acceptance of gifts. A man whose self is curbed should practice study and cleanliness and contentment and self-castigation. He should also make his mind incline towards the higher Brahman. These absentations, together with the observances, are declared to be 5 each. They give a special result when they are approached with a desire for some special thing, and in the case of persons free from all desires, they yield final release. As for the absentations and observances, 33, if there be inhibition by perverse considerations, vitarka, there should be cultivation of the opposites. Whenever in the mind of this Brahman, practicing the absentations and the observances, injuries and similar faults arise as perverse considerations, such as, for instance, I will kill him who hurts me, and I will also lie, and I will appropriate his money, and I will commit adultery with his wife, and I will make myself master of his property. Thus inhibited by the blazing fever of perverse considerations, let him cultivate the opposite of these. Let him ponder. Baked upon the pitiless coils of the round of rebirths. Well, there could be a round of rebirths with you only taking one birth and then some other being taking another birth, taking up where, you left off with your property, or some other beings, I take my refuge in the rules, Dharma, for yoga, by giving protection to every living creature. I myself, after ridding myself of perverse considerations, am betaking myself to them once more, like a dog, as a dog to his vomit, even so I betake myself to that of which I had to rid myself. Other similar inhibitions of perverse considerations should be applied in the other sutras also upon the aids to yoga. Since good things are full of difficulties, he introduces a sutra whose object is to give advice which will prevent the possibility of exceptions to these absentations and observances. So he says, as for these absentations and observances, the Sutra 33, if there be inhibition by perverse considerations, there should be cultivation of the opposites. In the comments upon perverse considerations, there is nothing at all that seems obscure. Well, we can elaborate on more sorts of sins that a person can consider committing against people, but let's go on to 34. Since perverse considerations, such as injuries, whether done or caused to be done, are proved whether ensuing upon greed or anger or infatuation, whether mild or moderate or vehement, find their unending consequences in pain and in the lack of thinking, there should be the cultivation of their opposites. Of these considerations, first of all, injury, since it is done or caused to be done or approved, is threefold. Moreover, each of these is threefold insofar as there is greed, such as there is desire for meat and or for skin, or insofar as there is anger, in which a man thinks he has been hurt by that man, or insofar as there is infatuation, as when a man thinks that what he is doing will be merit for me. Again, since greed and anger and infatuation are threefold, as being mild and moderate and vehement, there are thus 27 varieties of injuries. Yet again, since these are gentle and moderate and extreme, these are threefold as follows: gently mild and moderately mild and keenly mild, similarly gently moderate and moderately moderate and keenly moderate, likewise gently keen and moderately keen and vehemently keen. Thus injury is of 180 varieties. 81 varieties, okay. It is, however, innumerable because of the varieties due to specifications, nyama and options, vikalpa, and to aggregations, samutaya, due to the fact that the varieties of those who breathe the breath of life are innumerable. In the same manner, the classification is to be applied to falsehood and to other crimes. Now, since these perverse conditions have endless consequences in pain and in lack of thinking, one should cultivate their opposites. In other words, there is cultivation of those things, the endless consequences which are pain and a lack of thinking. And to continue, he who commits an injury first of all reduces the strength of the victim, then causes him